Hi, Odyssey Camper here. I finally got around to finishing the video for the DieHard battery pack battery conversion. It was a lot more difficult than I thought. Please excuse the sunglasses today. It's a beautiful day out. It's 40 degrees, which is about as nice as it gets this time of year in Michigan. So I've got the garage door open and I'm getting a wicked glare off of the concrete. So I'll put on the trademark Odyssey Camper glasses so I'm not squinting. And we'll talk about this battery pack. But first, I want to add a new section to my video, and I don't know if I'll keep it. Let me know what you think about it. When I'm on the road, I meet a lot of other YouTubers and people with blogs and whatnot, and compare notes and whatnot. And I come across a lot of good people and a lot of good channels. So I'm going to take this opportunity to show you a couple of channels that I've come across. It'll only take a couple seconds. And I'd suggest you at least check out one of their videos and let me know what you think about this section. I'll keep this short. All three of these channels were people I met while I was out at Mark Guido's Grand Adventure Q24 meetup in Quartzsite this year. I think they've all three got channels with something to offer, so I suggest checking them out. If I like them, you might like them too. Okay, let's get on to the battery pack. Those of you that have been with the channel for a long time, I'd like to thank you, first of all, for spending so much time watching my stuff, of all people. I'm sure you watch other channels, or maybe this is the only channel you watch. But anyway, when I started off, I started out there with a DieHard battery pack as the sole energy supply in my van while I was traveling. And the reason I did that is I already had it. And the DieHard battery pack at the time, you could pick up at a pawn shop for like 60 bucks. Now, if you can still find them, they're less expensive, but they're harder to find. Some people that have been longtime viewers of the channel are still using the DieHard battery pack. So I want to show you how you can do an upgrade on it. Now, at the time I originally talked about these things, about the only option out there that was making any traction was the Yeti Goal Zero. And the thing was like 500 bucks. And in my opinion, it was barely what the DieHard could do. The DieHard had other features, like it could jumpstart your car, had a built-in compressor, 400 watt inverter, so kind of, for my uses, it didn't make sense to buy a $500 Yeti unit just for the label. Nowadays, you have a lot more options. There are, I'm not going to mention any brands because you've seen all the reviews, and I don't usually do reviews on equipment on this channel unless it's something really unique. I suggest you check out like Will Pro's for good reviews on solar equipment. He does a good job. There's a lot of other people who do a good job. Plenty of that stuff out there. I don't need to cover it. But all I'll say is at the time, I thought they wanted a ridiculous amount of money for the Goal Zero. Now you can get something that's equivalent or better than the DieHard for about 200 bucks. But if you've already got a DieHard battery pack, well, let's see what we can do with it. So I started on this video about 2 years ago and promised it forever to people. The problem was in my garage, I didn't have heat in my previous garage, so, or heater, I should say, and I recorded it in the dead of winter, and so my nose was running a little bit. I was sniffling out in the cold, and when I watched it, I'm like, oh, that's just gross.
Slurping, sniffing, how is that relaxing? It's disgusting. I want to get pissed out of my mind in every cell of my body.
I'm not going to use this clip of video for anything, so I set it aside, and then I got busy moving out to Michigan and just got back to it now. So I apologize for telling everybody I would have it up in the next video. I think that was like 2 years ago, but it's just became a bigger project than I thought, as you'll see. And then after getting 80% of it in the can and realizing I couldn't use the video, it was just kind of depressing. So I put it aside for a while. You might recall that I had replaced the DieHard battery, which is originally 18 or 20 amp hours, with a 22 amp hour lead acid. At the time, the lithium iron phosphates were too expensive, so this time around I went with a Chin's 20 amp hour, and even though the lead acid's rated slightly higher amp hour wise, you're going to get much more out of this battery. Now, if all you want to do is get a little more power out of the DieHard or replace a dead battery and save the weight, you'll get about an 8 pound weight savings going with lithium iron phosphate. You'll be able to stop at the next step where I trim the cover. However, if you want to get the full capacity out of this battery, you're going to have to add a charger to it. And I'll explain a little more about that in a minute. I went with the Chen's brand battery because that's what I use in the van. I've had good luck with them. I went with this battery in particular because at its narrowest, it's 3 inches, just like the original. It is a little bit narrower side to side, left to right, as viewed in the picture, at 7 inches versus 7.2. But one problem it has is even though it's 6.69 inches tall and the original is 6.57, the original lugs were recessed, and these screw terminals are right on the top of the battery. And that presents the first problem and why there was a delay originally in this video. Looking at the back side of the battery door, you can see that it's reinforced with this kind of egg crate design. The original lead acid battery weighs 13 pounds, and this battery we're putting in only weighs 5 pounds. So we're not going to need all that reinforcement. That's a good thing because, as you'll see when I go to connect the terminals on top of the battery, we need that clearance. So the first thing you're going to have to do is trim the egg crate off. You can do this with a Dremel tool and a cutter or a sanding disc. If you want, you could probably melt it off, but I found the easiest way was just to use a pair of wire cutters and a little patience. Clip as it sits right now away from you, so clip the vertical, then clip the horizontal across, and you can see at the top there where I started. And this is what it should look like when you're all done. We can set that aside for now because we won't need it till we seal the unit back up at the end of this. Now you can go ahead and take the 3 screws out of the handle and all the other screws in the back of the case out, and that'll let you take the black case cover off. You might have to feed this hose through in order to get everything clear. And with the cover off, you can see the rat's nest of wires and hoses we need to deal with. Now I mentioned earlier that the air compressor in my unit no longer works, so I'm going to pull that out. That's a pretty fairly easy process, but I figured I'd get that out of the way first. There are 2 screws and a bracket that hold the compressor pump in. You can unscrew those, set them aside, pull the pump out, and unplug it from the main control board. That'll become obvious as you pull the unit out. By the way, I hope this video to slideshow format's working for you. I thought it would be a better way to see things, and with it paused, you can zoom in, look at the picture. I don't have to worry about trying to light everything as I move the camera around in motion. So I think it works better for this part of the video. Hopefully it does. Now this little square white plastic piece at the end of the hose, that's a pressure sensor that plugs into the board. You'll have to unplug that at the board. But if you want to keep the pressure sensor, even if your compressor is not working, you could screw that hose onto a valve stem and get a pressure reading and use the built-in pressure gauge that's in the unit. I have better ways of doing that now, and the pump doesn't work anymore, so I decided to pull it out completely. The next thing I got rid of was the charger inside. So if you wanted to just convert the battery and not make any of these other changes, you could just replace the battery. But the stock charger is not going to fully charge the lithium battery. You'll get, I think, about 80% from what I've read out of it, which is still better than the original lead acid. But if you want the full benefit, you're going to have to wire in a different charger, which is pretty easy. So I used this, I keep wanting to call it a Megastat, but I guess it's a Heagstat. I don't know. There's a million of these. It's a 2 amp charger. So 12 volt, 2 amp. It'll recharge overnight. I cut the clips off of it and then wired it directly to the battery. So that unit, here it is. By hitting this button, you can set it for lithium or set it for lead acid, and it'll do a different charging profile to a different voltage. And that plugs in at the back of the DieHard, where I've got it wired in. So that sits back in the original holder. So I got rid of the charger and substituted this charger. This thing is about 20 bucks. Back to the slideshow. I should mention that the charger board is located on the cover that you removed from the main unit. So it's right beside the door where you can store the hose for the air compressor. It comes off with a couple of screws to remove the board, and then you can pull out the fan if you'd like, which is just providing ventilation to the unit. I went back and forth on whether or not I should remove that, and I figured the thing that was putting out the most heat seemed to be the compressor, so without the compressor, I probably don't need that tiny little fan. Right where my index finger is the plug, and that's where you normally plug it in to charge it. That's going to come out too, but let's say you were going to keep this charger and just settle for 80% of the battery capacity or whatnot. you could leave that in. If you have trouble with yours where it doesn't quite make a connection, there are 2 pins right where the wires are that can be bent down. You'll see when you open it. Oh, wait a second, I just realized I have a photo of this. So if you look at the metal tabs where the black and white wire are, look at the opposite end of where the wire is. That's where the plug folds up and touches those contacts. And what you can do is you can push those 2 contacts down, they'll bend a little, and then they'll make a better connection. That's all there is back there that, that you're plugging into. So if you have a wonky connector, and they do go wonky after a while, where you touch the cord and it doesn't quite charge, and you move the cord around and it starts charging again, just bend those tabs and that'll correct the problem if you decide to keep the stock charger. Now, in the process of updating the battery in the DieHard 1150, I also removed a few things from it. So the first thing I removed were the cables, the jumper cables. One of the great things about these when they have lead acid batteries is they can jump start a car. But with the lithium iron phosphate battery in there, they don't do such a great job on that. They don't deliver enough current, not a high enough voltage. So I recommend one of these NOCO boost packs. That's what I use in the van. So if I have a dead battery out in the middle of the desert or whatnot, or on a cold day, I can jump start it. I can also help other people, which is usually what it gets used for more than my car. So I pulled out the cables. So the big thick charging cable's out of the way, the compressor out of the way, and the charger unplugged. You can see that there are now 2 open connectors on the motherboard. We're making progress here. By the way, this little aluminum box off to the side is the 400-watt inverter that's built into these units. We're going to keep that. Keep in mind it's not a pure sine inverter, so if you're running an electric blanket with a controller on it, you're not going to want to use this unit to run that. But I've run everything else off of it, including the battery pack for an HP laptop computer. So you'll read that they could damage the power supplies if you don't use a pure sine inverter. Maybe. I haven't seen it happen. Usually those supplies, if they're built properly, they have filtering built in, and that's not going to affect them. But if you get an odd hum off of anything that you plug into it, then you probably want to go pick up a pure sine inverter. I've had really good luck with the Bestek, B-E-S-T-E-K units for pure sine inverters. Fairly inexpensive. I've never had one go bad on me. Try to remember to put a link down below. If you look all the way down to the bottom, you'll see a thick red cable, and there's a brass colored screw holding it in right under the aluminum plate. That is where the switch is located that turns on your jumper cables normally. And to the right of that thick red wire is a stud, and that's where the positive cable will be connected to. So you're going to remove that when you remove the 2 cables. Basically, it's pretty straightforward. When you follow those jumper clamp cables back into the supply, you'll see where they connect. If you see something like this, where it goes to a board, that's not anything you're going to disconnect. The only things that have to be pulled off for those 2 cables are a couple of bolts. One of them, I believe, goes to the battery, if I remember right, and the other one just goes to this switch. To the left of my thumb, you can see the cable that goes back outside to a plug into the charger. That cable is actually going to connect to the battery. So there's a positive, there's a negative. We'll connect them to the top of the battery. And then looking at the rest of these wires, it's pretty obvious black is neutral or negative and red is positive, except for one cable. This big thick one with the red heat shrink tubing on the end of it. Mine was a black cable with red on the end of it. That is a positive cable, and it needs to go to the positive side of the battery. I don't know why they did it this way. Maybe yours will be all red when you look inside, but just in case, take some pictures as you're disconnecting things so you know what side was positive and what side was negative. Your red wires will be positive, and the red terminal of the battery is positive, and your negative will be black. If you pull the thick jumper cables out of the battery pack, in other words, you're not going to keep them, if you pull those out, which you probably should, you'll be able to use the screws, the shorter screws that come with the battery. If you leave them, you're going to have to replace those screws with something longer. These are M8. The short one with the washer on the left is the one that came with it. The ones on the right were longer ones that I ordered when I originally thought I would keep those cables. And then you may have to order some lugs or pick them up at, I guess you can get them at Home Depot to fit around the M8 screw. I got mine on Amazon. When it comes to the screws, you can find a lot of this stuff on Amazon now under Amazon Industrial. You can also generally find M8 screws at Home Depot or Lowe's. One place you can be guaranteed to get them is McMaster Car. So that's McMaster, C-A-R-R. And you're going to pay more there, and you're also going to pay about $10 to $15 in shipping. But if you want something specific and you can't find it anywhere else, they'll have it. They'll also have stainless and high-strength bolts and whatnot. These M8s you can put on with a M10 or 10 millimeter wrench or nut driver. So to charge this up with the charger, it takes about 18 hours to get a full charge. Don't hold me to those hard numbers there. It's roughly 10 hours to get 80%, and then to bring it up all the way seems to take about 18 hours. So I did that, and then I ran a little test with my portable Honeywell heat bud, running it at the 180 watt setting. It took about an hour and 15 minutes to run the battery pack down, which is considerably longer than it did with the lead acid. Now, I'm not suggesting you run a heater off of this battery pack. That'd be kind of foolish, but it's a good test just for comparative purposes if you watched one of the earlier videos where I did that rundown test. And here in this picture, you can see where that thick part of the wire going into the back of the DieHard, that's where the disconnect is. You can unplug that charger, and you can either store it in the back or Velcro it to the back of the charger or leave it at home or leave it in the car or whatever. And then you can just take that plug that's hanging out the back and tuck it into the little compartment where the air compressor hose used to be. Note that the LED display that shows the voltage on the front is actually strobed from left to right, so when you take a picture you don't always get all the numbers. That was reading 13.6 when I took this picture. The one thing you're going to lose when you do this conversion is an accurate battery remaining indicator. Where it says 76% on there, those are actually keyed to the voltage of the battery, and it's designed for a lead acid battery. So when it says you've got 50% remaining, those numbers are somewhat irrelevant. I found that at about 50% remaining, that goes to 75, and then it drops quickly after that. So at least with the load I had on it. But you'll get a feel for it when you use it, and you'll be able to estimate a little bit better how much time you have left. So I know I didn't show you everything you need to do step by step, but I think I left you enough pictures in there. If you do run into any questions when you're digging around inside this, always do it with it unplugged from the wall. But when you're trying to figure out how to wire things or whatnot, go ahead and drop me a comment or email me. You know, if you look hard enough in the About section, you'll find my email, and you can ask your specific question. I can't imagine there are too many people out still sporting one of these. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye to the DieHard 1150. Actually, I'll keep it around the house here. It'll be a great backup for me, but it's not going to be on the channel anymore. There are better solutions on the market unless you really like working on stuff or you already have one of these. Then it makes cost sense. But otherwise, I'll just go out and buy one of the commercially available units. I mean, it's just not worth it to do all the work these days when there are so many good solutions out there. And if you haven't looked at prices in a while, it's gotten very competitive. I'd hesitate to say half price of what they were 2 years ago, but definitely a third lower on most of those units. So if you haven't looked at them in a while, go shopping. If you use one of my Amazon links, then I'll get a small commission. If it won't cost you any more. Is that how the saying goes? Like and subscribe and all that horse shit. I guess that's it. See you soon. well, let's see what we can do with it.